Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We're going to have with us Chris Hayes talking about improving culture, the ill and true secret to sustained improvement.
So Toyota had and still has some pretty impressive stats. 40 plus years of sales growth, world leader in sales rank, 14th largest company in the world by revenue. That they're higher profits than any other automaker, market capitalization, really higher than GM, Ford, and Chrysler combined. No company outside of the Toyota group of companies has been able to keep adapting and improving its quality and cost as effectively and continuously as Toyota. So Toyota opens its doors to us time and time again. If you want to go to a Toyota plant, you can do it today. There's lots of tours. They are so welcoming. Toyota is kind of shaking their head, their folks, going, gee, I wonder why they wanted to see the solutions that we developed to address our own specific problems, and why aren't they more interested in learning how we develop those solutions? The bottom line is that the critical aspects of Toyota, they're not visible. You can't just take a tour and easily see them. Their superior results, they come more from these invisible routines of continuous improvement. That we are what we repeatedly do, and excellence, therefore, it's a habit. Simply applying the tools doesn't lead to excellence. But I think we all know this now, or at least we're getting to know this now, and this shouldn't be new ways to anybody. Now, the easiest way I've found to create habits is to systematize the things that we do, which gets us to do them over and over again, thus creating habits. Like Aristotle said, right? ORGAX, organizational excellence, models, I'll use ORGAX as we go on. Models, I think, really serve this purpose. A good model is also going to laser focus on embedding a commitment to continual improvement and also continual improvement into the culture. This is what Toyota has, and it's the essence of those invisible routines. So what is culture? We don't want it to be just a buzzword. The truth is every organization has culture. Now, whether it's the one that you desire or not, values, beliefs, and behaviors, those are the three biggies. And we oftentimes can't do much about the values people have, nor can we change their beliefs because they're usually based on, things that they grew up with. So that's really hard in a company to change. But we can influence behaviors, and those behaviors are usually the results of those values. People do when nobody's looking. That's kind of the behaviors we're talking about. So culture is a culmination of language used, the way people treat each other, how respected and valued they feel. Those are the things that culture comes up with, and if it comes into play with. And a positive culture doesn't happen by accident. I've learned this over the years. It has to be nurtured and developed by the leaders of the company, where they have to walk the talk and they have to model the values and the ideal behaviors that they want to happen in everything that they do. So what we're going to talk about is the ability to develop a purposeful culture, one that's based on behaviors that your organization should define as ideal. If you don't manage culture, it manages you, and you may not even be aware of the extent to which this is happening. That's profound to me. And then there's this one. This one's from Lou Gerstner. He's a former chairman of IBM, ran things there, had a lot of popularity, did some really great things. He says, yet I came to see in my time at IBM that culture isn't just one aspect of the game. You can't get the same results that Toyota does simply by copying what they're doing. In my opinion, that laser focuses on culture, and that's the Shingo model. The Shingo model has its roots and what began as the prize, the Shingo prize, and it was like 88, I think, or 89. A pattern started to emerge. Most of the prize winners weren't able to sustain the excellent results that they achieved. And this new information led to the prize, I should say, being transformed from just the prize into a model that companies could use to model and sustain their ORGAX efforts. There's so many more. So these principles came from all of these great thought leaders and the research that they did, not from the Shingo Institute, just to write a book to make $1 million. It's not in the end, the ideal behaviors, which is the biggest part of culture. Remember, we have values, beliefs, and behaviors. It brings about consistent and ideal results, which is over on the left there. So the model is so powerful, by the way. Those lagging indicators, revenue and profit and all of those things that we can't do much about after the fact, you look back and go, gee, I don't know how that happened, to looking and focusing at behaviors first. Every company has systems, we're over on the right-hand side of the model, that live within it. Now, most companies have some version of that. Have you ever heard of or been maybe part of a system that inspires people to cheat or cut corners? What are some examples of systems that have driven good or bad behaviors inside of your organization? Does that drive? What does it cause people to do when we measure?
I can tell you from my perspective, tell me how someone's measured, I'll tell you how they'll perform. And
Okay.
or they're going to fudge the number when we see that with the assignment of scrap categories.
Those are good. What we're doing here is I'm starting to paint a picture for you. And as you start to connect the dots, I'm confident that you're going to have some ahas just like I did when I was introduced to this different way of thinking. In the model overview, you saw that we purposely design our systems to align to principles. So there's a connection between those two diamonds. And we also select the tools that are going to enable that specific system that was down at the bottom to do what it's supposed to be doing. That's not necessarily true. And I'm asking you to shift your mindset because we're going to practice a new way of thinking here. So the Shingo model focuses on 3 insights of organizational excellence and that bring about this new mindset. Notice the common theme on these 3 behaviors. We begin with the first of the 3 insights, and that insight came from the Shingo model. Ideal results require ideal behavior. And for our purpose, this is how the Shingo Institute defines ideal results and ideal behaviors. What behaviors might you see if you had a power-hungry culture? What if you had a fear-based culture? What's a behavior that you might see? Those are behaviors that we would see if we have these kind of characteristics in our culture. Now let's reverse it. If we went out to purposefully see what behaviors we could observe, insight number 2 is that purpose and systems drive behaviors. And what do we mean by this? The purpose of an organization answers the question, why? Think back to that example I gave on the incentive program that rewards high production over everything else. If I'm rewarded for quantity, I might take shortcuts on quality. So maybe letting the idea here. So that insight has been discovered. Behaviors are important, but what informs ideal behavior? Insight number 3 is that principles inform ideal behaviors. And to get a better understanding of this insight, let's first learn about principles a little bit more. Change over time necessarily. They remain true. The final characteristic is that principles govern consequences. Regardless of our understanding of the principle, we are subject to, this is the detail of that blue diamond that's at the top of, so you can see it coming out of there. The principles are categorized into, and this is how they relate most closely to the organizational culture or the behaviors, systems, and results. So let's start with cultural enablers and the principles: customers, suppliers, your community, the society in general. So it's respect in the whole sense of the word. Most employees will tell you that being a lot of studies say that that's over the pay. If I respect others, which was one of the answers, what would I see them doing? Positivity, that's a thought. It's not an action. Tell me what I would see if they were positive. Asking questions, got it. Lead with humility, especially in Western society. It's a common trait, though, that is shown in many studies to be what people admire most in their leadership. So they want respect, but they also want their leader to show some humility. It's important to understand that humility is not about being weak or submissive. It's about having the courage to admit when you don't know something. If I want to live this principle, what behaviors do I want to implement? And quality at source. Perfect quality can only be achieved when every single element of the work is done right the first time, right? So quality at source Quality at the source means that if an error occurs, we want to make it so that that error is detected and corrected at the point and the time that the error is made. It means do it right the first time. Don't pass on your crap. Live the principle of quality at the source. Write it down somewhere if you've got some paper and pencil. What behaviors do I want to see people doing? This one is at the heart of the Toyota production system. And if you've been practicing lean for a while, I'm sure you've heard of it. That's how he measured, and he considered the reduction of that time as his measure of increased customer value, because it helped. When he reduced that, it helped achieve faster, more reliable delivery to the customer. So the idea is to remove all the obstacles, or we call them waste. And again, if you want to live this principle, write some behaviors down that you'd like to see happening inside of your company, because that's what the model teaches us to do, is plan. We're planning for our culture. The next principle in the dimension is seek perfection. And this is really one of my favorites. From a practical standpoint, perfection is never going to be achieved. Actual, in whatever scientific method you choose to use, whether it's PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, DMAIC, which is our Six Sigma methodology, or any other one, for that matter, embracing scientific thinking means jumping on a journey of relentless and systematic problem solving. And I know you have lots of good people in your organizations. It's impossible for even good people to consistently produce ideal results with a poor process. There is a natural tendency that we have, especially here in the West, to blame the people involved when something goes wrong. When in reality, in the vast majority of the time, the issue is rooted in a practice the saying, what in the process failed? What in the process failed? What in the process failed? So when they see a problem, they focus on the process, not the person. Because believe me, after 30 years of experience, but what I want you to do this time is think about the answer from the perspective of 3 levels of employees: executives, managers and supervisors, whatever you call them inside. But it's not just them, it's compilation of everyone. And we have to plan for the behaviors that we want to see at every level. As we go through each one of those, think about, we hit on our next principle, creating value for customers, a little bit when we talked about the principle improve, flow, and pull. This is a good example of how the principles themselves are also interrelated. And ultimately, to create value for the customer, we have to define value through the lens of that customer. We're customer obsessed. We start with what the customer needs and we work backwards. Love it. So this is the epitome of the principle. So what would you see the executives doing? What would you see the managers doing? What would you see? An unwavering clarity of why the organization exists, where it's going, how it's going to get there. All of that enables people to align their actions as well as to innovate, adapt, and take risks with greater confidence. If you don't have that understanding, it's really hard to do those things. And so without constancy of purpose, which between the systems that we have, so that we're able to make better decisions and improvements. Everything is connected, and the better we understand that connection, the better we're able to make changes. So if executives are going to reward identification of defects, then having them use tools like Pareto charts and histograms probably makes sense. So we identify those tools. If we want managers to identify root cause, then we might want to teach them 5 whys and fishbones or whatever. And if you want, we're using a framework to plan our culture by focusing on behaviors first instead of results. And I can say I want less quality defects. That's a result, but how am I going to get there? So how will I instill this into my company's culture? And I document my systems this way or similar, then it's less likely that somebody's going to come in and either take away a tool or add a tool just for the sake of adding it. This is a big picture look. You can't see everything, but I'm going to go through and just the aim of the system is what workflows. Think of these as types of work that happen in the system, those big chunks. And then, of course, who are the team members. And for a daily huddle and a lead review daily, weekly, we're going to have staff meeting, bi-weekly, we have a go to Gemba, go and observe, etc. So again, purposeful planning for how are we going to communicate. Below that, we have planning for the improvements to the system. We often miss this, are that we need to measure and what the goals are. These are usually based on the aims that we identified before. In this example, there's 5. I typically only recommend you focus on 3 at a time, but if it's a more mature system or you're a more mature organization, then you can do more. But I really like we decide which behaviors we want to happen in order to achieve those KPIs. Typically, I would add an actual goal for these. So it's a KBI instead of a KPI. And remember, these are the leading indicators of the form or anything like that. But if we start at the top where we have dimensions and they're connected to the principles, and in this example, it's cultural enablers, and we connect to respect every individual. And then we connect to some supporting concepts, which we didn't talk about this time, and then to systems. And so lead us to living those principles. And if we say what we want, it kind of leaves out the, what do we want to quit doing? I don't have to go down the negative path. Okay. Now I have to.
Yep. Yeah, it looks good.
Okay.
Great. Just to make sure that
all right,
people
take a
can see
screenshot,
it.
everybody.
It's the best tool to make a culture of an assessment on quality of culture.
There are several out there. There's one that I use specifically with my clients, and it's assessment. I don't do the, well, let me back up. There is an assessment that the Shingo Institute, when we are assessing for the prize, that we use to assess culture. And basically what we're doing, those behaviors that you want to see, which is going to build your culture. I think, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I haven't seen this not work. You can go beat people and you can have, reward system, or you can play games. I've seen a lot of those, and those fit very well within the behaviors. I want to see people submitting near misses. Then I start measuring it, and then you can do. So what we ended up doing is trying to connect to the emotion of the people. And my question back is to do what? What are we trying to incentivize them to do? So if it's a behavior that you're trying to incentivize them to do, so you've identified the ideal behavior, we want them to report near misses. We want them to show up at their meetings. We want whatever the behavior is. That doesn't always work. So like the near misses, I've seen lots of companies go, yeah, if you submit, 10, we give you, some sort of reward bucks or something like that. Other ways to incentivize people, what I see that works the best is peer pressure. Intrinsic with them that they're getting. People like to feel like they're involved and valued. That is the president of a company that I was working for. I was flying all over the place to our different plants. I was home maybe a weekend out of every month. I had young kids, and I got this personalized handwritten letter on a card that was to me and to my husband, thanking us and telling us how important we are and why we were important, the work that we were doing, and with a gift card to go to one of our local house cleaning companies to do my laundry. Being likes to feel valued, and anything you can do to do that is have a wonderful day.
Chris, thank you very much. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Here's another episode of LED's webinar series. Bye now.
Ciao.
All right, Chris, great job as always.